invention is actually an optional part of innovation, which I think will blow some people's minds because they equate innovation to being the same as invention. So for Alex to say, hold on, invention is an optional part of innovation, I think is an awakening or a massive insight for a lot of people.
Welcome to the Success Consultancy's Just Great People podcast, the podcast that introduces you to ordinary people who've done extraordinary things. My name is Barry Eustance, and I'd like to introduce you to today's guest. Hi, everybody. It's Barry Eustance here from the Just Great People podcast. I'm really delighted to welcome from Moldova, Nick Himowicz, who's an innovation and business coach and entrepreneurial coach, of whom the following is said. Nick is a world-class facilitator. He is an expert in Strategyzer methodology. I enjoy working with him, and I'm confident you will too. And that is not often you interview someone who's had that sort of recommendation from the great Alex Osterwalder. So Nick, welcome to the Just Great People podcast. Do tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so as you say, I'm an innovation coach. I'm an absolute fanatic of Strategyzer's methodology. And as you can see behind me, the business model canvas, the environment map, value proposition canvas. I first attended a workshop with this Alex Osterwalder in 2015, and it just completely rocked my world. After that, I started using the tools, applying them, and then helping other people apply them. And I've never looked back, really. And that's really what I do now every day. And I was lucky enough to work with Alex for 3 years as well. So now I'm an independent coach helping small startups and also large corporations develop their organizations using these tools.
And there's quite a wide bandwidth there from founders, entrepreneurs through to enterprise-sized organizations. And for our esteemed listener and viewer, could you explain how the business model canvas, the value proposition canvas, and the whole Osterwalder toolset, Strategyzer toolset works? Because I think for a lot of people, it may be something they've never heard of or used, and I'm a fan too. So we're both on the same side of the fence. Perhaps you could explain to our listeners exactly why and how it helps any size of organization.
Yeah. Typically, before the early 2000s, if you had a conversation about strategy, it probably sounded like this: blah, 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 blah. And what you thought you were saying was probably not what was being received by the other side. And so when you've got people sat around a table, whenever there's a strategy conversation, probably what was happening was that it was just misalignment and confusion. Because what happens is people say, I think we should do this. Let's do Uber's business model. And then everybody's got a different interpretation of that, but nobody wants to slow the conversation down. And so everyone's thinking different things. And so we don't really get anywhere. What the business model canvas did was it made it tactile, tangible, and concrete to talk about business models. So now we can say, what do we actually mean by a business model? Well, what we mean is it's a description of how we create, deliver, and capture value. Oh, and it happens to be made up of 9 building blocks. And here they are, and we can see them all at the same time, literally on one page. And why is that valuable? Because a picture is worth 1,000 words and a business model canvas is worth 1,000 meetings. Okay.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
If we get that picture on one page, everybody can understand it. And once everyone can understand it, then we can start questioning it. Then we can start making it better. But typically what happens is you've got people sat around a table and not everyone's understanding. So how can they possibly question properly if they don't even have the same alignment on what is the strategy or what is that we're trying to do? So this visual tool, the business model canvas, really helps us break down how we're going to create value, how we're going to live value, and how we're going to capture value all on one page. And the other tools all connect around it and have other uses as well. I could go in a lot of directions. I didn't answer the bit about the big businesses all the way to startups. The tools are really useful because they can help startups identify what is the thing that we're trying to build and who are we trying to build it for. So foundational questions. But they can also help big companies. And this is where the business model shift patterns come in, where it's almost like a recipe. Like, what is the recipe of a business model that other companies have used? What would it look like on our business? How can we use that as stimulus to create a new business model? So we can then in bigger companies use these tools to kind of say, how can we improve what we've already got? And how can we invent new businesses as well? Because the best companies, or as Alex would say, invincible companies, are the ones that constantly reinvent themselves and they compete on superior business models.
I think, again, if you like, from my position in the corner here, answering questions on behalf of our listeners and viewers, it's really interesting when you sit around a table and you ask people about strategy, even strategists, I might add, you can get about 109 different answers for what strategy is before you even start the discussion. And Peter Compo, who wrote The Emergent Approach to Strategies, point was, that's exactly what happens. So if you're not starting with a common language and a common picture, you've got a whole raft of problems that you're never going to be able to solve because, as you say, you're not going to get alignment. So creating that perfect mental picture, and it's about value. And maybe, Nick, you can explain what value is and why it's so important to the customer and the organization that's delivering that value.
Typically, what I see when I work with companies is they start a business like this. They go, I've got an idea and I know how to build, so I'm going to build this thing. Okay. And then typically the conversation is, okay, but have you spoken to customers to understand what they really need? And the answer is always, no, not yet. We haven't got time for that. We're going to build for 3 months. It's only going to take £10,000, but we're going to do it. We're going to build it because we know how to do it because we're all developers here. So we know what to do. And then about 3 months later, I'll say, hey, did you end up speaking to customers? Have you built the thing that you were going to build? Nick, you wouldn't believe what happened. Like, it was crazy. There was this reason that we would never have thought of, meant that we couldn't finish. We just need 10,000 more and another month. Come back a month later, still not ready, another 3 months. And it ends up being a year. They haven't spoken to customers and they don't understand what customers really need. Okay. And that's just the beginning. So I have that conversation all the time. What the value proposition canvas does is really break down what are the customers' jobs? What are they trying to do? What are they trying to get done in their work and in their life? What are their pains and their frustrations and their desired goals, their desired outcomes? And when you understand this, you really understand what's valuable to your customers, okay? And then you can turn it into a description that resonates with them. And that's what the value proposition canvas really helps. It zooms into who are our customers and what does value look like for them? And then what's our value proposition, which is a description of that value that we can bring to them. And so what's great about these visual tools, again, is we can make all those things explicit. And I do value proposition, I do customer profiles in a very specific way. I actually have a visual while I'm doing a customer interview where I'll ask the questions, what are you trying to get done in your work and your life? What are your difficulties, your frustrations? I like to ask, what keeps you up at night? What's giving you nightmares? Imagine I'm Harry Potter and I've got a magic wand and I can give you anything you wanted. You've got 3 wishes. What are they? And then that helps you understand what they're trying to achieve, right? And I write it out on sticky notes on a digital whiteboard in front of them. And so that then, and this is the key thing, this is the thing, because it's the same with the business model canvas. What tends to happen, especially when you've got these kind of personalities where they just want to get stuff done. We just need to get on with it. Come on, we ain't got time for this. Right?
Very common trait, isn't it?
Yeah. But you need to slow those people down.
We haven't got the money. We haven't got the money. We haven't got the money or the budget to stop and think about how to do the planning. We just got to do it.
You've got, the type. So those are great. Those people are great, but you've got to make sure you're building the right it. What is the right it? And the way that you get there is by doing these interviews and by visualizing it on a screen while you're doing it remotely or in person on a physical canvas. When someone says something, you write it down as you've understood it, as you've heard it, as you've interpreted it. But you try to write it down in their own words, but you write it down and then you repeat it back, you show them. And then the physical thing is a great way to slow the conversation down and to really drill into, have I got it right? It's almost like with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you've got to pin the person down because otherwise they're wriggly and they just want to move the conversation onward and go, yeah, that's it, more or less. But what we're trying to do is go, no. We want to understand it exactly from your perspective. And by having it written down in how you've understood what they've said, they can then go, if they go, yeah, that's right. That's what you often hear when it's wrong. Yeah. If you're hearing that that inflection point, inflection in their tone of voice, you know that it's not right. And you go, no. Let's, whoa. Let's stop everything. What if this isn't it? What is it precisely? Help me understand that, because that change can be the difference between success and failure. Because the next thing they say verbatim might be what you should be putting in your advertising.
Yes.
Because that's where the gold will come from. And ChatGPT is not going to give you that, because it's come from the actual mouth of the person that you're trying to sell to. So that's where these visual tools can be really helpful in understanding what value is for customers, and clarifying it.
Absolutely. And you've highlighted the really important element here of the human interaction. I know everybody's worried about AI and the GPTs, and AI is going to be brighter than us. Fine. That train's already left the station. The human innovation coupled to basically the end user is human is really important. And we can get onto innovation perhaps in a minute. But the extraordinary thing about the simplicity, the elegance and simplicity of the business model canvas and the value proposition canvas is quite how it works. And it's not immediately apparent. I watched Alex do a great presentation on Vimeo. Find it if you can, folks. And if not, I think it's accessible from the Strategyzer website, where Alex is doing a presentation about the Tesla value proposition, obviously very, very topical at the moment in March 2025. But the value proposition and the business model canvas for Tesla. Basically, as you look at it, on the left-hand side of the canvas, and Nick may flash one up in a second, you have basically what you are able to deliver and what's the side of the canvas. And so it's the left-hand side of the canvas, which is the top image. And on the right-hand side is what the customer wants, the jobs, the pains, and the gains. And it's the bit in the middle, which is the graphic below, shows really how those two are aligned. And it stimulates innovation. It also aligns language and thought and clarity. Would that be fair, Nick?
Yeah, I think the biggest word is alignment, or the most important word is alignment. That's what these tools create. And it's so underestimated.
Yeah. And it's the simplicity of it and the flexibility of it, how it can be done either electronically as it can through the Strategyzer website or manually with sticky notes. But it's the simplicity and alignment that it really gets teams focusing on. Essentially, it can be used for soft systems modeling, SSM, where people are literally sticking Post-it notes on until you get clarity. And it's not a question of building huge lists, but actually pinning down and drilling down to the value proposition and what it is you're actually offering that is going to be of value to the customer.
Just while I've just put this up on screen, so you've got two things here. You've got if people aren't familiar with this tool, let me just give a quick overview. So on top, you've got the business model canvas, which is based on 9 building blocks. You've got the customer segments on the far right-hand side. Often people start here when they fill it out, but you don't have to. Alex designed this to be process agnostic. So you can pick it up and use it however you want, what works best for you. Typically, though, it makes sense to start with either the customer segment or value proposition, but you're very, very quickly going to fill out the whole thing anyway. So don't worry too much about where you start. It's just important that you do. So get clear on who it is that you're helping, your customer segments, your value proposition. What is the thing? What is the value that you're bringing to them? There's 2 things you can put in here. You can put the product and you can put the value, the description of what it does, how it helps the customer. You've also got the customer relationships, which describe the type of relationship that you have with your customers. Now, there's 2 things that you can put in here. You can describe what that relationship looks like. Transactional, one-off. It can be a long-term relationship. It could be a personal relationship. It could be a automated relationship. It could be a high-touch relationship. You could be creating a community. There could be fans, So there's all these different types of relationship. But also you've got that process of how do you get customers, how do you keep customers, and how do you grow customers? All of that can be in the customer relationships building block, but you're not going to put all of it when you tell the story, because what you want to do is kind of put in the zoomed out version, you just keep it simple. But if you want to zoom into each block, you see how the value proposition box connects to the square. That's called the value map. And the customer relationship box connects to the circle. That's called the customer profile. It's almost like you create a tool for every box to help you go deeper into understanding each one. Here, we've just got those 2, the circle and the square that relate to the value proposition canvas, value proposition and customer relationship. So the customer Customer segment is on the right-hand side, and the customer relationship, if you look, is on the top in between the value proposition and the customer segment. Customer profile.
So here we have the expanded view of the business model canvas, which was in the previous diagram, in the previous image, the top square box. And Nick can then take us through the various segments and how they work.
Yeah, great. So we've got customer segments, who are the people we're trying to serve. The value proposition is both the thing and the value or the benefits that it brings to the customer. The channels is how we get our products and services to those customers. I like to think of it almost like the platforms, and it can be, you can think along the whole customer journey, like how are you getting it to them? It could be a lot of different things, like sales teams, could be the physical ones. You could be physical stores. It could be through specific social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, how people find out about you. You might use, for example, different platforms to actually deliver the service. For example, Amazon can do all of it. They might be the ones actually delivering a lot of it. So there's so many different platforms that you could use as a channel. You've got the customer relationship, which is a description of that relationship. And you can actually describe the relationship: long-term, one-off, penalized, automated, etc. But you can also describe how do you get customers, how do you keep customers, and how do you grow customers. Then you've got the revenue streams, which is a description how you make money. You've got the key resources, which are the key things that your business has that it can make money from: intellectual property, a factory, the team. You've got your key activities, which are the things that people are doing. And then you've got the key, which is generally delivery or marketing and sales or innovation type activities. And you've got key partnerships with who can you work with to help you deliver value to customers, and then the cost structure, the main costs. And the key thing is to use this to tell stories. So when I see university students do this, university professors love turning things into be as complicated as possible. Okay. And so
I have to say that Nick is speaking from personal experience. Nick has been an associate professor of innovation at Exeter University. And so he knows, he's walked the walk, and he knows exactly what he's talking about here. And the simplicity is the key to this, isn't it?
Exactly. And I've also been working with Imperial College London as well. And what I've seen with other universities as well is that students will be asked or be taught that they need to put almost a whole essay into each box. And that's not useful. What's more useful is that you almost have 2 or 3 words in each box. And like any good story, if you put too much information into it, it's going to be boring and not make any sense. So actually, the beauty is in the simplicity of saying, really, like, how can we make this as simple as possible? And how can we connect the boxes in the way that we tell this? One of my favorite examples is Calendly. Their business model is just immaculate. And I made a video about it if people want to go more deeply into it. But the way that each box connects, that's the beauty. And if you take anything out, it almost doesn't work anymore. I could go into that, but it'll take me 10 minutes to break it down. So maybe just watch the video for that one.
Or when you come back, we do the follow-up to this one. We're looking here, some key elements here. Strategy is not a shopping list, nor is it War and Peace. It's actually a meaningful dialogue that gets people aligned, focused, and is an integral part of the big picture. We say in success consultancy that before any project runs, you've got to have 3 essential legs of a stool, and that is strategy, infrastructure, and budget. And actually, if you take all of those elements, they're all sitting here in the business model canvas, or BMC as it's sometimes called. And it is that simplicity and clarity that's going to really do the heavy lifting, isn't it, Nick, for entrepreneurs, founders, all the way through to multinationals, e.g. Tesla, as was used by Alex in his example. One I recommend everybody watches if they can find it. We'll try and get a link for it.
You're also getting me to think about another tool, which is in the most recent book, The Invincible Company, and it's called the Corporate Identity Triangle. And this one also helps with defining the strategy. I like this because a lot of people have heard about the business model canvas. Most haven't heard about a lot of the other tools. So it's nice to be talking about some of those other ones. So in the Invincible Company book, this is where this comes from. There are 3 things on the strategic guidance framework around corporate identity. So first of all, you've got the strategic direction, okay? And then you've got the trigger questions here. Why do you do what you do? What do you aspire your organization to be? What arenas do you want to play in the long term? And what kind of financial performance do you hope to achieve? I think this resonates a lot with kind of Roger Martin's approach to strategy. And then you've got the brand image. Let me see if I can get that there. You've got how do you want what, which is what you say about what you do, and how do you want the outside world to perceive you? What does your brand stand for? And then on the culture side is what kind of key behaviors do the people in your organization need to exhibit, and what enablers do you need to put in place to facilitate the culture you want? And if we zoom into culture, you've actually got the culture map, which we can talk about as well. But this is a good tool to accompany the business model canvas. And when you put them all together, it's just very powerful.
Extremely. And again, never, ever underestimate the value of culture, the importance of culture. Even for a one-person operation, the whole cultural picture is crucial to how the organization subsequently evolves and scales. And going back to John Cotter's work on culture and performance, they found that organizations that are agile and adaptive and stakeholder focused are the ones that did best at the enterprise level and elsewhere. And it's important, isn't it, that we look at the cultural element in the context of the strategy, because the two are completely indivisible. If you're not able to have an agile, adaptive culture that is able to switch, and this goes back to Eric Ries's build, measure, learn, pivot in lean startup. We've taken back to Nick's example earlier on, where Eric's company spent tens of thousands of hours coding for a little emoji for or avatar for messaging. And they spent ages, a fortune doing it, lots of tens of thousands of dollars, put it out, discovered nobody wanted it. So they got some 14-year-olds in to look at it and to give them some feedback. And they went, it's quite simple. It's just not cool. And all of those tens of thousands of hours of coding were thrown in the bin and they started again. So build, measure, learn, pivot was something that came out of that. It has to be said that the idea of Strategyzer's business model canvas, value proposition canvas, culture map, the whole suite of tools is to actually get well ahead of that process. Pivot is probable in almost every startup, but it's getting you ahead of the game. Would that be fair?
Definitely. There's a great tool I want to talk you through, Strategyzer's approach to this, because it builds on that work from Eric Ries. A massive lesson I learned from Alex Osterwalder was this idea of cognitive murder, he calls it, which is a bit extreme. I think cognitive overload is another term, which is putting too much information all at once in front of someone. It's almost like when you see a business model canvas that's been completed. So you've joined a meeting late, you're 2 hours late, and you see a business model canvas. Everyone's proud of it, because they're like, look at this. And it's almost like when you've built an IKEA, a set of drawers, you're proud of it. But people don't realize the work that's gone into it, except when you see that completed business model canvas and you weren't there during the process, it's a lot. And you kind of, whoa, that's a lot of information. I made that mistake earlier because I presented the business model canvas with the value proposition canvas without presenting one at a time, slowly, and presenting each box carefully. So I want to show you an example of the design test loop, but show you how you should present things. So let me just share my screen. There are two sides to the design test loop, and this is the process of build, measure, learn, but in Strategyzer's approach now, and it's building on top of build, measure, learn. So this idea is that first of all, you need to do business design. And with that, you're generating ideas, but then you're creating specifically business prototypes. So these are the business model canvas, the value proposition canvas, the environment map, all these tools. So you're mapping out the idea so that everyone is on the same page, so that everyone understands it. Another example of a business prototype might be a napkin sketch. So very just quickly making it clear. And then you assess it. Now, what do you assess it based on? Well, if you're a big organization, you should have a criteria for innovation ideas or new ideas that are in and new ideas that are out. So your company should decide what types of categories do you want to be innovating in, what types of industries. And so then if you've got an idea that's actually completely out there, that at this stage it should be killed because it doesn't fit within our innovation kind of criteria. So we've got a criteria so we know what types of projects we should work on. If it's not within that, computer says no, you don't continue. But if it is, you continue and you decide, should we test it? We're making some assumptions in each box of the business model canvas and value proposition canvas before we actually start testing. We're only just guessing. So we need to get out of the building and start testing. And so what we do is we take those guesses, those assumptions, and we turn them into testable hypotheses, okay? And we use the assumptions map, which helps us gauge across, have we got evidence of that this is true versus no evidence? And also, is it an important assumption versus less important? An important assumption means that will our whole business fall apart if this isn't true? So we map it out and we find the things in the top right-hand corner, which we don't have evidence for, but are very important to our business. And then we need to run experiments. The book Testing Business Ideas by David Bland and Alex Osterwalder outlines a library of 44 different experiments that you can then run to collect evidence. You then run the experiments, and then we use the test card, which writes down, what do we believe? You know, what's our guess? How are we going to test it? How are we going to know if we're right or wrong? And then what we do is we then, after the experiment, we use the learn card to say, well, what did we learn? And Eric Ries talks about this as well. You have to write it down, because if you don't, you'll play tricks with yourself and you'll go, well, we already thought that was going to happen. Like, no, you didn't. You didn't, because you didn't write it down. You've convinced yourself that you did. So This is a really important part. And then you get to this point on decide, where there's three options that you've got here. One is pivot. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back round to the business design phase, and we're going to be able to come up with go back to the drawing board. It's what we used to say, right? Go back to the drawing board, new ideas, sketch out the value proposition, business model, see if we can adapt it. So we'll pivot and then see what happens there, and then persevere. This is where we're going to go around, test something else. So yeah, that was great. Let's test something else now, or let's run another experiment for the same thing, because you can run multiple different types of experiment to collect multiple different types of evidence, because one source isn't enough, right? And then the last option is you just kill the idea completely and move on to something completely different. So we've always got that at the decide phase. So you can see the business design phase, the test phase, and then in deciding in the middle, you've got one of these three options that you can choose.
And how valuable that is to a new organization, because here's a little statement that I don't think is the least bit controversial. What separates world-class sprinters, are milliseconds or fractions of a millisecond. Marginal competitive advantage that actually gets you to the winning line first. And it's not about the people who sprint fastest, but they're about the ones who sprint most intelligently and strategically, who actually get there first. Great podcast I did with Simon Hartley about being world class. And in his case, it was, again, simplification. Work out what your job is, and it's possibly to swim 2 lengths or run 100 meters very rapidly, or to win. And then what are the 5 things that make that happen? And essentially what this is allowing founders and large-scale organizations to do is to stop, think, simplify, test, and then commit it to writing, so that they can actually assess what is likely to work and how they're going to test that it actually does. So they're not burning 2 really valuable commodities, either of which will kill a business: time and money. Nick, fair comment?
Absolutely fair. Very, very great description of the process.
Yeah, and that's the innovation element of this, which is another one of Nick's significant capabilities. And you've seen there are plenty here. These tools that Nick's presenting is giving innovation the opportunity to breathe and to live. And
let's just talk about what we mean by innovation as well, because my favorite definition of it is innovation equals invention plus commercialization. So it's creating something and then creating value from it. In the book, The Invincible Company, Alex shares a different one. And it's interesting because he says that invention is actually an optional part of innovation, which I think will blow some people's minds, because they equate innovation to being the same as invention. So for Alex to say, hold on, invention is an optional part of innovation, I think is an awakening or a massive insight for a lot of people. So you can see here, successful innovation is R&D optional, business R&D, which is customer value and business model. We've got the value proposition canvas, the business model canvas, and then execution. Okay, so that's what I see innovation as. And the key thing here is that innovation is an optional part of the innovation process, whereas lots of people think that the invention part is all of it. But no, it's about creating value and then executing on it.
And execution is one of the things that private equity organizations, 62% of them were reporting that slow or delayed execution was actually damaging or contrary to their expectations. There is no point in having a strategy unless you can execute it. And it's very difficult to execute something if you haven't got an executable strategy. And you then getting back to the innovation, that if you've got an idea that you can't strategize and then execute, it's just a thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
Nick, really, really helpful. And what else for the emergent entrepreneur, founder, someone who's starting their business or enterprise that's perhaps losing competitive advantage? What are your thoughts as we're sort of running out of time at this point? Nick, will you come back? Can we do an additional podcast to follow this on, because this is such a valuable masterclass, I think, for entrepreneurs and organizations generally. What is it that these organizations can do to stimulate innovation, the executable element, the strategy and the innovation, the whole process? What is it that they can do?
Something that's really on my mind at the moment is that there's a company here in Moldova called Simples, and they exhibit the 3 characteristics of an invincible company that's in the book that Alex wrote with his colleagues. And I'm doing a case study on them now to really understand how they've been so successful, because there are three characteristics of an invincible company. They constantly reinvent themselves, even when they're winning. They compete on superior business models, and they're not afraid to expand into new industries. So much so that it can be hard to categorize these types of companies, because they do lots of different things, like Amazon now. They're doing lots of different things. So this company, Simples, it's called, based here, they've been going since 2001, 2002. They exhibit all of these characteristics. It's been very hard for me to create a one-page overview for them, because of all the industries and categories and things that they've been involved with. But what really stood out to me was the culture they've created. And I showed the culture map earlier on, which talks about the enablers and the blockers, and it's almost like the conditions that enable certain behaviors to come out. So that you've got the behaviors, the actions that are happening in the company, and then you've got the outcomes, the results, the fruit, the harvest, you could think of it, and the result. And so they're doing some things that have been very powerful that I think other companies could learn from. And I think that's most useful for this question, which is they had a blocker, which they say here in Moldova, if you need a product manager, you can't hire one, you have to build one. So that's a big blocker. Right. So what they did was they invested in 300,000 euros worth of courses around product management and leadership. And with that investment, and on top of that, they also they made sure that everybody had a buddy and a mentor. And the behavior that they had to exhibit, that academy, they called it, was the enabler. The behavior was that everybody in the company must spend 10 hours a week learning from that academy, watching those courses. And that the outcome is that they now have a skilled team. And then there was another enabler, was that every business unit has an innovation function, which means that teams apply what they learn straight onto real projects and products. And then they create new products, which means that they've got innovation happening. And what the founders are doing as an enabler is they don't take any outside investment. The behavior that they exhibit is that they reinvest their profits into innovation, into the company, and they get more. The outcome is more innovation happens. So if other companies can copy those behaviors and create those enablers, I think that's going to really help them, whether they're big or small.
And that feeds very much into the Success Consultancies, People Change Leadership and Management course, which really works with how you create volunteerism within an organization. You get your people involved in actually delivering, building, and bringing to life a higher purpose, strategic vision, so that people can really take ownership of it, get excited about it, bring their own leadership to it and their own innovation. And suddenly, the classic example, isn't it? 5 different uses for a paperclip. You hand it to 5 people and say, give me 5 uses. You suddenly end up with 25 uses for a paperclip. And it's the same concept. And it has that exponential effect, as seen by Google, Amazon and others, and also the Bill Campbell, the $1 trillion coach. Again, picking up on your point, Nick, the guy who was coaching people like Steve Jobs, allegedly the only person ever to turn down a phone call from Steve Jobs because Bill was playing golf at the time, was coaching people like Steve Jobs and Eric Schmidt. Everybody needs these teams. They need coaches. They need mentors. They need people who are going to provide that additional creative and innovative input to the system. And then Nick has done a fantastic job, I think, of providing and demonstrating the simplicity of the tools that are available then to propel that to an executable innovation. Is that fair, Nick?
That's what I'm trying to do. That's what I try to do.
What we're going to do is we're going to put links to Nick's website, also to Simple's, the organization that Nick was talking about, and the various other components here. And Nikki, will you come back and can we carry this forward? Because it feels to me like we've only just scraped the tip of the iceberg.
We've only scraped. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and we know there are a lot of entrepreneurs and innovators out there who've got great ideas they don't know how to take to market, or they've taken ideas to market and they've got a blocker and they've taken a hit and they need a little bit of additional guidance. The bottom line is everybody's been there, including some of the great luminaries of Silicon Valley, who I won't name at this stage, but there are plenty of them. Nick, thank you so much indeed. We're going to give you Nick's complete details along with the show notes here. And Nick Himowicz, thank you very much indeed for joining the Success Consultancy's Just Great People podcast. We're going to see you again soon, I hope.
Yes, an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Barry.
Great. Thanks, Nick. We'll see you again soon. Many thanks for listening to our Just Great People podcast. And you can really help us. Please do remember to like and subscribe, and please share this podcast with everybody you know. We'd really appreciate it. Thank you. So that's it for today's Just Great People podcast from the Success Consultancy. We hope and trust you've enjoyed it. Please join us next time, and please do remember to subscribe. Thanks for joining us.